Okay, so my name is David Bortz, and we're going to talk about not losing your mind. Yeah, there you go. So here's the thing. We run 13 sites over the past bunch of years, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the process of what we had to deal with in migrating from code that existed in 1997 to code that runs today. Now, I'm not going to show you a plugin because of the interesting characteristics of getting these two things going together, but I'll take you through what they do and what's involved, migration tips and techniques, and so forth. We've had a lot of history here, and the challenge is to move 70,000 some odd articles from a very, very old content management system into WordPress with certain really specific limitations. Now, over the years, we've served an awful lot of web pages. We have a pile of outbound links. Our challenge is to make sure that all of these things survive in the migration. So this is the problem statement. The server is down. Now, we've been, like I said, we've been running this environment since 1997, upgrading it each time there's a new upgrade. Upgrades for the host environment, which I'll tell you about in a minute, stopped around 2004. So the challenge becomes, how do we continue to take it? Now, this is my life. That's my TV, that's my living room, and this little guy down here is my server monitor. And this is how we make sure that the server is on. My wife is very patient.
Yes.
Have one of those.
This could be the coolest picture I've seen today. Outside of that cow we had a few sessions ago.
You had a cow. I can't do a cow.
Not Bart Simpson like, but yeah, there was a picture of it. Go on.
All right, because I can't do a cow. I can do a lot. I can eat a cow. I can cook a cow. All right. So anyway, this is the problem statement.
Oh wow.
Green is good. Red is bad. Red has been happening a lot. This is the reason for this migration. We are running on a system started in 1997. PHP was version 1. There wasn't really blogging. If you talked about blogging, nobody would know what you're talking about. Matt and Mark were 13, which really bothers me at a level that you cannot possibly imagine.
I've got a disturbing mental image.
Yeah. Just stop there. Stop there. And development was hosted in something called Userland Frontier. Now, I don't know if you've heard of Manila or Radio Userland or any of those sorts of things. A guy named Dave Weiner. Userland Frontier was incredibly ahead of its time. It had a built-in web browser, built-in web server. It had a built-in language. It had a built-in object database. It was an incredibly powerful system. The problem is it didn't evolve over time. And so we had the problem statement of getting all of that data in. So it had a limited data capacity for an object database, which is holding all the information. Now, in 1997, I did not expect to be talking to you about my object database in 2011. I really didn't. So what I tried to squeeze into that object database in 1997 is still being squozed into that object database today. Not good. Now, it was open sourced in 2004, but it has very limited support. I wrote a MySQL and SQLite add-on to it, but pretty much I was one of the only developers, and there were some limited problems with it. One is almost constant crashes. Two is various memory management links. Fails on 64-bit machines, and here is the fatal flaw. They bought a binary library sometime in the 90s from a company that no longer exists and doesn't even have any record on the website, of any website. You can't Google it, it's not there. It's just a binary. It is a binary locked in time. And the problem is that Frontier relies on this binary, so as a result, it just can't be updated. And so we can't really migrate this thing to anything modern. So that is the problem. I have 70,000 articles, hundreds of thousands of outgoing links, running in an environment that is really deeply powerful, that is really deeply obsolete. So the challenge is, move it. And that's what we've been doing, I've been doing, for the past year or so. So these are all the subsystems that we're talking about. We're not talking about a small system here. This is an end-to-end content management system that's been running for about 14 years. And I'm talking about not just article formatting, but all of our ad management is in here. It manages all our ads, all our ad history, all the people who we're dealing with, the specific formats, all of that. It manages author management and all the author-related systems. There's also built into it an integrated distributed denial of service attack system. You guys may have heard a little bit about what's been going on with WordPress the last week. It is not fun to find millions of computers hitting your computers on a daily basis with a distributed denial of service system. This took us down about 4 years ago, and there's now a defense system inside. That too needs to at some point be migrated. So all of this needs to be moved over, including all our content. That's been the project that we're working on. So the original ZENPRESS, this is just a quick snapshot of what the original ZENPRESS is. It's what I'm using right now to produce articles that are on Domino Power and Outlook Power and Author Power and Webster Power and so forth on a daily basis. It runs, in a sense, it's like a multi-site environment, in the sense that these are the different publications and these are the statuses of the articles across the publication. So one of the reasons I looked at WordPress, and specifically WordPress 3, was the multi-site capability, because that adds a nice built-in functionality that I didn't have to replicate. I'll move that to the next slide while I take a sip here. It has a very deep forms management system. It has a very deep tracking system. All of this stuff has to move over or be duplicated in some way in the WordPress environment. Now the thing is that a typical ZENPRESS article is different from what most people are used to. Because what we looked at, and this is 1997, okay? So remember, in 1997, there wasn't a WordPress, there wasn't a typepad, there wasn't a movable type, there was barely PHP, there wasn't much out there. If you wanted to do something other than HTML, you needed about $20 million, you needed to be CNET, and you needed to buy a vignette. That was your answer. So we're looking at a system where we're going to produce magazines on a monthly basis with 9 to 12 articles. We're going to produce news on a daily basis. I have 4 or 5 employees, and they're all going to be cutting HTML on a daily basis. And so my nightmare was, what happens if somebody puts a tag in the wrong place? This is 1997. This is what we came up with. Here's an article. This is actually one that is current. We ran this a couple days ago. This is the editorial markup language. And so what happens is the editorial markup language inside of ZENPRESS separates out the functioning of the formatting from the functioning of the actual article. So a flying head, when you do a dot flying head, it generates the little blue flying head. A dot title generates the title. The dot author not only generates the author, but indexes it throughout the database. Begin sidebar starts the nice little table area. H1 gives us a heading, and sidebar does the same thing, and so forth. Super URLs are another part. Rather than going off and typing href equals blah, 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 they look like crap in your articles. If you have 2 or 3 URLs, all of a sudden you have all this code. And if you paste it in wrong, for example, if you do something in like a text editor and you paste it into your code, all of a sudden WordPress decides that, gee, I'm going to make the entire rest of your article into a link. Kind of annoying. So super URLs were the way we solved the problem a bunch of years ago, and that's basically, this uses the DocuWiki format, which is 2 brackets, a bar, and 2 brackets to just put a URL. But the actual plugin that we've got running in WordPress now just lets you have a left delimiter, a middle delimiter, a right delimiter. So if you want to re-emulate ahref, you can do that for some reason. Anyway, and then smart pagination. Smart pagination is things that control where the page breaks. So that, for example, every 3,000 characters or so, at the next paragraph, break the page. Or don't break the page between this section and this section because we want to finish this discussion and then move on. So, for example, the .page function says throw a new page. The .more function is built in for the WordPress. It puts it on the home page, the little bit of clump on the home page. Begin keep and end keep is a control break. It means that if it thinks it was going to break it here and I want it to break it here, you do a .begin keep, a .end keep, and then it goes. So this is the format of articles. We have 66,014 articles in this format. We have to move all 66,000 of these articles to a new format. And so the way I've been doing this is writing a series of plugins. Okay, so as you can see, the editorial markup language, one of the benefits is it's enterprise-wide. So that, for example, you don't have one person deciding that a big heading is centered and another person deciding that a big heading is bold and on the left. We have this problem on the I write for ZPNet and CNN, and we have this problem now. Some of the guys who write for ZPNet like headings that are big and bold in the middle, and other people people like them small and on the left. That is not an enterprise-wide look. So this way, you're able to say, okay, if you want a heading, .h1 or whatever, you do a .h1, and the system deals with that. And even if you port those articles to a completely new look later, a totally new look later, you're able to do that. And obviously CSS does some of this, but we go way beyond CSS in this functionality. So let me give you an example. .callout, all articles submitted, blah, 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 generates this. So in your text, you have a .callout, and it generates this. A .table sequence, begin a table, set the width, set the alignment, set the header, set the rows. When you're done, generates that. And again, remember that if you change the formatting of the system like everything else, it moves on. But this is where it differs from CSS. In that, if you have something like review title, iPad 1 or iPad 2, and WordPress. Now let me back up. We have a website called AuthorPower. AuthorPower is the website we use to coordinate our authors. So it has our writer's guidelines, it has our review guidelines, it has how to submit stuff, that kind of thing. And so we also have a list of articles to be reviewed, products to be reviewed. So for example, if somebody says, gee, I'd like to have somebody review this Dell mouse, we would go up there and go, okay, here's a .review title for the mouse, and go ahead. But what it generates is it can generate things like review opportunity 1, iPad, review opportunity 2. Note that the numbers will automatically increment. And note further that the subject gets added to the URL here. So the thing is, this is different from CSS in that each object, each one of these commands, is smart. They can have a great deal of capability within the system. Now, I believe this was about where I was going to start doing a demo, but I do have a small amount of code to show you just to go along. For the record, the software works, the Alienware does not. Okay? My code works, their machine not. Just one point. Windows, me. Just to be clear.
Using Windows Me?
No. Actually, to be fair, the userland frontier environment works on Windows Me. It does not work on Windows 7, part of the problem. So, yeah, that's scary, huh? Anyway, so here's a little teeny bit of code. Now, I'm not going to go into this in gory detail, but the idea is that each of these commands is a very small chunk of code that you can develop for your site, or we're developing for our site, because the ZENPRESS system pulls it and runs it when it needs to be run. So at the very top of this thing, can you see a mouse? If I move a mouse on here, do you see it on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So for example, the page array is something that is passed to WordPress that contains an array of individual variables that you can pass through. So count, for example, is a great array. If it's not defined, make it 0, and then increment. Down here it says, what's the review opportunity? Well, let's grab the page array. So each time this .review opportunity is found in a page, it goes and increments the thing. Likewise, down here, we pass parameters to it. The params are the stuff after the command up here. And we pass params to it, and it does something to it. In this case, it builds an ahref with the subject matter. The idea is that these commands control the formatting. But the challenge here is, and this stuff's been running in ZENPRESS under Userland Frontier, running on Windows Me, since 14 years ago or something. Since there's a couple of you here that were probably like 10. Okay, so this is where you guys didn't pull your weight, okay? The demigods did not smile on us today. So we're going to skip the demo part and move on. At some point I'll try to make a video of this actually running. But I hold you people responsible. We're down in South Florida. This should have worked. Okay, so the ZENPRESS stack. The ZENPRESS stack is actually the architecture of ZENPRESS. And as you can see, what I would have shown you, but what is functioning here today, sort of, when this is not attached to that, it runs pretty well, is obviously there's the WordPress core. Next to the WordPress core are a series of plugins. These three were the ones that correspond to making the commands work, the smart pagination work, the smart objects work, and so forth. The challenge is that we have a bunch of other plugins, an editor plugin, an publisher plugin, a legacy import plugin, and then this is the work to be done. Now, one of the things that I don't think I introduced when I started here is this is year 1 of this project, because this isn't the only thing I do for a living. So this is year one. I've been working on it for a year. I've gotten part of the puzzle done. There's a lot more to go, and I'm going to go into that design process in just a minute. So around this are two things. This is really important. When I set this project out, I said, all right, we cannot lose a single URL. Now, ZENPRESS URLs are formatted as donopower.com/00958 blah blah, which is like the article ID followed by, you know, a month and year in a strange format and so forth. We don't want to lose a single one of those things because we don't want to lose our Google juice. We don't want to have a single article linked to anywhere of those 66,000 articles that, even if they were linked to in 1998 or 1999 or 2004, 2007 or 2010, are lost. Not a single URL can be lost. That's what this stuff does. This is a Perl-based system. And the reason it's Perl-based, by the way, is really interesting. I looked at what would happen if I had to make a change to that system when WordPress required perhaps a different setting in PHP. And I wanted to make sure that the URL dispatcher was completely disconnected from any need of WordPress to make any changes to the PHP ini settings or anything like that. So this is built in Perl and MySQL because the mod rewrite function of Apache, which is the thing that redirects code in Apache, this was written in Perl, so that system, which redirects all the URLs, would not screw with this system, which made it harder, by the way. Okay, so the next part of this puzzle is down here, which is the host CMS clue. These things don't come for free. These things require a tremendous amount of code to support them. They require an entire library of systems that have to support this stuff, including an entire object database engine for managing all of this, a parsing engine for dealing with all the super URLs and the parsing of the smart objects and how to manage it, a large range of utilities. We have an object forms engine and object tables engine that builds the admin pages, and then of course the debug system, because this stuff is a challenge to debug. And the thing about this is that this is all pure PHP. It's a pure PHP library. So theoretically, it could run in any environment that needed PHP. And I'll tell you why that's important in a minute as part of the design drumbeats that go into this process. But the key to this is the library is separated from the functionality to generalize the challenge. So if you think about it, we have these series of layers in the stack. All the green runs right now. All the yellow runs right now. The red is all the to be done. That's another year or two. Okay, so why did I choose WordPress? Well, I looked initially at doing it in pure PHP and Drupal. My original thought was I wanted to do it in pure PHP. I basically wrote the first thing in its own environment. I was going to write the second thing in its own environment. But my problem is that since 1997, the world has changed a little bit. You know, among other things, we have a lot of security problems that have changed between then and now. There's also a number of other benefits to moving it to somebody else's environment. But that was a big one. And so what I wanted to do is I didn't want to have to keep my own security code up constantly. I'd already done years of that. We'd already been hit by at least one denial of service attack with 1 million machines a day pounding on our computers. And by the way that worked, that was really kind of interesting. The way that worked was we had an email to a friend page on Connected Photographer, and somebody somewhere figured out that they could pump their email messages through our email to a friend page. And as a result, they attempted to email millions of emails through our email to a friend page. And so all of a sudden, the server monitor thing that I showed at the beginning started to melt. It was not a happy 3 days. Originally, I took Connected Photographer down. Then I started to build mitigation tools into it. Then I started to build a rerouting system into it. It was just not a fun 3 days, I have to say. So even though WordPress.com and all of us will experience distributed denial of service attacks from time to time, at least we can all build on top of everybody else's work if I use an existing system as opposed to building it on my own. Drupal had a smaller aftermarket. I took a look at the aftermarket for WordPress and the aftermarket for Drupal, and honestly the community didn't seem quite as nice as the community that I had found with WordPress. It's true, it's really true. I mean, I didn't know the WordPress guys when I started. I just looked at what was the technical need that would move from point A to point B as quickly. This rocks, because anything that's in the aftermarket, I don't have to build. That's good. So I like the plugin and template architecture. I actually looked at how it was put together. I traced through I actually did a debug trace through the plugins to kind of see how they work. The other thing is I write for ZDNet and for CNN. Both are WordPress sites. And I thought, well, if I could just make sure I focused on one environment, and I wasn't constantly context switching between environment A and environment B on a constant basis, then I could say, okay, I'm just working in the WordPress world. And that was a big help. Now, it's not as big a help as you might think, because all of them are different versions. But at least it's all WordPress, and I can go, oh, well, version 2.7 does this, and version 2.9 does this, and version 3.1 does that, and so forth. But this is what finally sold me. You guys. I started going to WordPress.tv, and started watching the videos of people explaining stuff in WordCamp. And I was like, this rocks, this is helpful. And so actually, the final decision about why I chose WordPress was watching the WordCamp videos. True story. Some of those people are weird, but they're really smart. Okay, and I really like that. So, now let's get into design and tips for you guys. The question was initially, how do we take this monolithic system and start moving it? And the key to this is not just sitting down one day and going, I'm going to code, man. All right, I'm going to move this thing out of your time. This is what I wanted to see. I wanted to see, okay, dot command, the plugin's created, and inline link generation, okay, the plugin's created, and HTML filtering, okay, the plugin's created, and so forth. And those plugins do a tremendous amount. They do code generation so that you can do, you know, .begin code PHP, and it makes it look all pretty and all that kind of stuff. So this was the early design. If you're going to migrate a system, spend some time thinking about its parts. Don't just go ahead and say, I'm going to code. First off, now this is mostly my own work and working with myself and Denise and figuring out what we're doing. But if you're in a bigger organization, this becomes a Bible of what you're looking at. Keep track of where you're going, and then you can start to think about it, because otherwise you're going to lose track. I mean, each of these little line items is a massive subsystem of probably tens to hundreds of thousands of lines of the original code. So you got to keep track of where this stuff is going. The next step is this master requirements grid. Now, I'm not going to make you read this or deal with it. I just want to give you a feel for its scope. Again, each of these pieces is a major component of the ZENPRESS system that needs to be migrated. So, for example, these three are the three plugins I sort of showed you a little bit about before. The admin menu system, admin form system, admin table system. Now, you guys are familiar with the dashboard. ZENPRESS had its own system for doing that and building its own dashboard, which was actually really revolutionary. I didn't want to lose. I'm not going to make you look at that today, but basically, it makes moving things around and setting validations and setting up fields, and it even does things like making certain fields visible for certain people with certain privileges. So, for example, your ad sales rep that you contract with outside can't see your profit for the ad, and it's all built into how the table system goes together. So I want to put all that together. Now, where we are today is
10-minute warning.
Cool. I don't know, I'm about at 10 minutes, so we're going to rock on. Where we are today is the things that are checked off are working. But notice down here things like the drop-down menu navigator. WordPress 3 buys me that. So each of these things are places where things were bought in, or where a plugin is available, or things like that. Okay, so let's talk about design drumbeats. I'm going to take a sip and it's going to go out of my 10 minutes, but I don't care.
What cost?
Oh, Florida water. Okay. Anyway. So, no URL left behind I talked to you about before. Design drumbeats are what is the pattern we keep building towards? What are the rules? What are the guidelines? What's the rhythm? As we code, boom, boom, what are you doing? What are you thinking about? So use best practices, even if I'm the only one looking at the code. Because I looked at the code in 1997, and I'm looking at the code again in 2011, and I don't remember anything from 1997. Design first to get it working, not for productizing. So none of this is a pitch for products, because make it work. The key is to get those websites moved over as fast as possible, not how do I pitch it for a product. Reusable code is king. And someday we may turn this into a product because it's a big piece of stuff, but it's not. Don't design for that and don't look for that. Reusable code is king. Design this stuff so that everything can be generalized for reuse. And that's why there's a library architecture, because I don't know where this is going to be used at any time. only use disposable code for one-time moves, like moving one big chunk of files over to the other. But everything else is reusable because you want to make sure you don't have to build this again. Subsystems need to be flexible so that they can be reusable in unpredictable ways. Because you don't know how your code is going to be used even if you think you do. Now the other thing here is, this is key for you guys. I made it religious to avoid modifying or customizing the WordPress data structures because I need to be able to migrate this stuff across. So where necessary, my code goes in and learns what the data structure is and deals with it from that basis, as opposed to doing the easy hacky thing of changing my SQL formatting. Maintenance modularity is key. Document as you code. Don't forget two things. Comment your code. Again, you may write it today, you're going to have to maintain it sometime far in the future. And I use lab notes. I use lab notes for what did I do today, what is my history, what's going on with it, reference points, how to think about the code. I do all of that. There's two benefits to this. One, if you ever build anything you think you might want to patent, your lab notes are good. If anybody else says they invented it, not you, you have lab notes that show history. But most importantly, it will keep you from jumping off a building when you don't know why in the heck you did what you did. You will have some notes that will say, I did this. I have one piece of note where somewhere says, this is magic, don't touch it, I don't know how it happened. Such is life. And then maximize your use of outside products because the stuff of the community gets you moving faster, farther, and quicker. So that's a key. And wherever it can save you time. Okay, so some best practices. Detailed lab notes, I mentioned that. Use an IDE with a symbolic debugger. This is, if you're building a plugin, an IDE is an interactive development environment. It lets you look at the nits and nats of why the guys who wrote the WordPress core did what they did, or at least what they're doing. So you can go figure out what it's doing so you can then deal with it, or you can figure out what you did at 4 a.m. the other night that you don't even remember 4 a.m. the other night, and you can come back and fix it. Really important. It'll save tremendous time. Define the elements of the project. Test locally and then with lower priority sites. What I mean by that is you all run a local WordPress, a MAMP thing or a LAMP thing on, or XAMPP or something on your machine. Test it locally, but then when you go live, don't go live with your highest priority projects because these things may not work. And so you want sites that aren't visited as much as opposed to the one that is going to keep you in your home. Use the lower priority projects first. Use standard compliance systems even when they annoy you. PHP annoys me. Linux annoys me. WordPress annoys me. Why? Because they didn't do it the way I would do it. It doesn't matter. It's a standards compliant system. It gets you a long way away so that you can move forward and not have things like, I don't know why my Alienware won't run. You know, make it standard. Document all changes to outside code. So if you buy a theme or you buy a plugin and you must change it, document outside changes. And so, for example, the themes that I have run for the sites I brought up, every line I've changed, including every line of CSS, I said, this is what it was, this is what it is, this is why I changed it. Because when the guys who write the themes send us another theme, or an update, I want to know how to go back in and fix it so it does what I want it to do. And again, memory is always a challenge. Use these drum beats and keep focused. One of the examples I said before was productization. So let's talk about the migration challenges I've had. About 3 slides away from the end here, guys.
4 minutes.
Ah, perfect. Okay. The other guy went long. I'm going to take about 4 minutes. Finding a good IDE. This was hard. Everybody I talked to about an IDE for PHP and WordPress said, oh, I put print statements in my code. Okay. I liked Uptown, it was discontinued. I use this thing called PHP Ed. It's a symbolic debugger. It's pretty cool. Switching to Linux because I was running on Windows has proven to be a challenge because of security issues. Juggling the old system while bringing a new one live has been a major challenge. It's like changing out a ship's hull walls at sea at a storm. I have advertisers. My advertisers don't like the site being down. They don't like to hear, well, I'm taking the site down now and it'll be back up next year when I finish writing code. Not good. Fighting denial of service attacks. Fighting Yahoo's complete disregard for robots.txt and constantly pounding on my server. I dislike Yahoo intensely. And finally, context switches. This is going back from other work to coding because this is not my only day job. I have a lot of other things I do in my day job. I write a lot. I wrote a book in the middle of this thing. I got sent up to New York to do a History Channel piece. I have a lot of stuff I have to do. So the challenge is switching from I'm Mr. Coding Guy to I'm Mr. Being Nice to People Guy, and back and forth. Then, of course, Mass Effect came out. Not a good idea. Fixing when they crashed, because I'm not the only one, because I'm not done migrating. Another thing that got in the way, Mass Effect 2. There's the stuff of life. You know, there's a little bit about family time, there's a little bit about working out, sleep is occasionally nice. You guys know that from last night, obviously. And then finally, so, you know, that lost me a whole week. I had 3 or 4 characters not at level 60. I needed to get them there. So much for coding! All right, so let's talk about the helpful tools and resources, and we can wrap this up, because these guys have been very helpful. Now, Mason.